Former Representative Liz Cheney calls her new book Oath and Honor. It's both a memoir and a warning. And its pages are an accounting of what happened inside her party and in Congress in the weeks before and after the January 6th attack on the Capitol by supporters of former President Donald Trump. She paints a harsh picture of many of her former colleagues who refused to stand up to former President Trump when he tried to overturn the 2020 election. She calls them collaborators and enablers. And her warning in this book is stark. Democracy in this country is at stake if Donald Trump is elected again. He, she writes, is the most dangerous man to ever inhabit the Oval Office. And she joins me now. Hi, Liz Cheney. Thank you for
Wonderful
being
to
here.
be here. Thank you.
I want to start with why this book and this warning now.
Well, I thought it was particularly important because the threat that we have faced and the threat that I describe that began really in the time period that I cover in the book is ongoing.
Mhm.
And, we're now in a situation where it looks like there's a very good chance that Donald Trump could be the Republican nominee, for example. And people really, I think, need to understand and recognize the specifics, the details of what he tried to do in terms of overturning the election and seizing power, and the details and the specifics of the elected officials who helped him. And as well as I talk in the book, in the epilogue in particular, about what he would do if he were elected again. And we don't have to guess about that because he has been very clear in terms of um, being at war with the rule of law. But in terms of what happened on Capitol Hill, what happened in Congress in the aftermath of the 2020 election, I do think it's very important for people to understand how close we came to a far greater constitutional crisis, and how quickly and easily, in a way that is frankly terrifying, members of Congress who had seemed reasonable and responsible before the 2020 election in many cases, how quickly those individuals decided to put their own political survival ahead of their duty to the Constitution. And it's a scary story, but I think it's one that it's really important. I think people deserve to know what happened from the inside.
Now, you don't hold back in this book. You name names. Former Speaker Kevin McCarthy comes off as a hypocrite and a coward. You write that he told you Trump knew he'd lost the election, and yet McCarthy repeats these lies and ends up publicly defending the president after the attack on the Capitol. You also write about current Speaker Mike Johnson, also an election denier. You say he was easily swayed by flattery from Trump, and you criticize their cowardice, the party's cowardice. Why was it important for you to call out party leadership by name in this moment?
Several reasons. One, with respect to Mike Johnson, when I wrote the book, he was not the Speaker of the House, and uh, I focused very much on the role that he played because it had been such a destructive role. Even before he ascended to the speakership, and um, I was very involved and engaged in terms of the debates that we were having about whether or not Republicans should sign on to the Texas amicus brief, for example, or about whether Republicans should be objecting to electoral votes. And Mike played a particularly destructive role. He claimed to be a constitutional lawyer. He claimed to be somebody who was committed to the rule of law. And then time and time again, really did ignore the rulings of the courts and made assertions to our colleagues that were not supported by the facts or by the law or by the Constitution. And the story of the role that he played, I felt, was a very important one to tell, even before he was in a role of prominence that he is now. And I think that history really has to be informed by uh, specific individuals and by people understanding that it doesn't take very much, uh, tragically and frankly, in a way that I find heartbreaking.
Hmm.
It didn't take much for people to decide that they were going to ignore the most fundamental obligation I believe elected officials have.
In the beginning of the book and the beginning of this, you are in leadership in your party, and you feel that a lot of your party understands what's at stake with you. But then slowly that chips away, and at a certain point, you're almost standing alone. What was it like? Did you have a watershed moment where you realized the party isn't with me?
After the election, I think there was a period of time where many of us in the party thought, look, there may be legal challenges. Every candidate has the right to do that if they have a basis for it. But certainly by the time the Electoral College meets, Donald Trump will concede. It'll become clear that Joe Biden is obviously going to be the president, and we will all, move forward. And so there were just many moments where I thought that was going to happen, and it didn't. Um, Certainly then, when we got to January 6th, then obviously I talk at length in the book about the lead up to and that day itself. Um, but in the aftermath of the 6th, there was near unanimity in the sense that Donald Trump was responsible for what happened. Republicans uh, proposed legislation that would have censured Donald Trump, and the language in that legislation was virtually identical to the article of impeachment. Um, Republicans proposed a bipartisan commission to investigate what had happened, and the commission that the Republicans proposed was called the Commission to Investigate the Domestic Terrorist Attack on the U.S. Capitol. So people, it was clear, it was common sense. We'd lived through it, um, and that near unanimity though began to dissipate very quickly.
What was it that stripped away that unanimity?
I think it's several things. I think that some of it was certainly just sort of, raw political ambition. That, every member of Congress, if you asked them, listen, if you have to choose between the Constitution and your own political survival, every one of them will say, well, of course, we will choose the Constitution. But as it turned out, when it came down to it, most of them, or too many of them, didn't. Some of it was fear of violence. And I talk in the book about members who told me they believed Donald Trump should be impeached, but they couldn't vote to impeach him because they were afraid for their security, for their family's security. People really need to stop and think about, what does it mean in America that members of Congress are not voting the way that they believe they should because they fear violence instigated by, then the sitting president of the United States. That's a place we haven't been before.
What's the stake here for the country?
It couldn't be higher. It really couldn't. And sometimes you hear people say, there was an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal recently where they suggested that even if Donald Trump were elected, it wouldn't be that bad because, of course, we have these institutions and we have these traditions and we have the separation of powers, and that people could somehow count on that to restrain him. And one of the main messages of my book is, no, you can't. You cannot count on those institutions to restrain him. You will not be able to count on, a House of Representatives led by Mike Johnson, and full of individuals who've already pledged allegiance to Donald Trump. They won't restrain him. United States Senate, with people like Mike Lee, Rand Paul, they won't restrain him. Tommy Tuberville holding nominations for the most senior positions at the Pentagon. Why is Tommy Tuberville doing that? It's causing great damage to this nation's military readiness. Is he holding those positions open so that Donald Trump can fill them? What's he doing? It's certainly not serving the purposes of the United States of America.
Now, the Republican Party is in your blood, right? I mean, the daughter of Dick Cheney. In the book, the former vice president, in the book, you describe a lot of towering figures in the Republican Party, from the generation before you and your current generation. You still describe yourself as a conservative with these conservative values, but are you a Republican?
I am certainly not a Trump Republican. I think that the Republican Party, as it exists today, is dangerous to the country. Um, I think that we have to work to rebuild a conservative party, and I don't know whether that means that the Republican Party, which has gone so far down this path of a cult of personality, whether it can come back. or whether we will need to build a new party, another, a party that truly stands for conservative values. And either way, I think that is a project that is crucially important, but that won't be completed by 2024. And so I think very much about what is the most important thing to do now. And I think the most important thing to do now, without question, is to make sure we stop Donald Trump. Um, what American politics looks like after that, what the Republican Party or a new Republican Party or a new conservative party looks like after that remains to be seen.
Are you considering a run for the presidency in 2024?
I haven't ruled it out. I look at it though very much through the lens of stopping Donald Trump, and so whatever it will take to do that is very much my focus. I think the danger is that great that needs to be everybody's top priority.
Liz Cheney, her new book is called Oath and Honor, a memoir and a warning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Wonderful to be with you.